During the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
This is the crucial moment in this act of the movie. It all hinges on what Dave says now. Will he pick up on what Hal's hinting at, or will he shrug it off?
You're working up your crew psychology report.
He doesn't bite, and the spiral that ends with 5 murders begins. What follows is one possible explanation for Hal's behavior generated by this hinge moment. A conflicting theory will be dropping within days, so keep your eyes open for that one. We have to start at the end of the act with Floyd's secret message to understand Hal's motivations. It might be hard to imagine for us who've seen the movie dozens of times, but first-time viewers are like Dave in this situation, unaware of the true purpose of the mission until this final puzzle piece falls into place. Remember, the last time we saw Floyd, he was holding his head in excruciating pain. On my initial viewing, I thought he might be dead at this point, but we see he's very much alive, and his message connects the dots between Acts 2 and 3.
It can be told to you.
Theory 1. Stealing humanity's destiny. We'll start with the idea that Hal is testing his, for now let's call them colleagues. He makes 2 supposed mistakes during the chess game, mislabeling one of his moves, then presuming Frank's next move, which we'll come back to, and declaring,
Mate,
when Frank could have delayed it a bit longer. His human opponent doesn't notice this or get bothered by it and gives up.
I resign.
He then prods Dave to find out if he's questioning the mission at all. Dave brushes it off.
You're working up your crew psychology report.
In this theory, after hearing Floyd's message, Hal has taken it upon himself to test the crew, to determine whether he or his creators are superior. In other words, who is more worthy to make first contact with
Intelligent life off the Earth.
The tests have been getting more obvious, relatively speaking, to see if the humans will ever pick up on his purposeful errors or hints toward the real mission, but they never do. This last one, with Dave, now solidifies Hal's idea that he has surpassed his creators, and he puts his plan in motion to eliminate the crew. Hubris syndrome is a disorder associated with overwhelming success. Its features include contempt for others, loss of contact with reality, reckless actions, and incompetence. Sounds like Hal, doesn't it? There are several subtle but important things that show his contempt for humans, fueled by the contrast between his duties and the crew's.
I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
This realistically depicts how humans might kill time during a long, uneventful spaceflight, but possibly gives Hal a false sense of humanity's true nature. In addition,
This sort of thing has cropped up before, and it has always been due to human error.
which may or may not be true, but the fact that he fails to take any responsibility and instead blames humans is telling. His God complex
We are all foolproof and incapable of error.
convinces him that he's the only one able to complete the mission alone,
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
and you have a reason for him to steal humanity's destiny. I called them his colleagues earlier, but they're more like his tools, only there to do the few things he can't do himself. Why should these lazy, useless, error-prone flesh sacks make first contact with higher beings when they're my tools, Hal must think, no more than Dave's screwdriver? He was already suspicious of the crew.
Rotate the pod, please, Hal.
But we don't know that until later, when he's reading their lips, revealing that he's ignoring direct orders from his supposed superiors in order to eavesdrop without alerting them. And he's surprised to find the humans would consider
Disconnection.
after one measly mistake. After all, he
can reproduce most of the activities of the human brain, and with incalculably greater speed and reliability.
in other words, still far more capable than the lowly humans. At this point, Dave doesn't know the ulterior motives, so from his POV, Hal must seem even crazier since he's supposedly on a pure research mission. It doesn't make sense to Dave until Floyd's revelation, which puts everything prior into context. It turns out the goals of the mission were far loftier than he knew.
18 months ago, the first evidence of intelligent life off the Earth was discovered.
But this theory has to address 2 key details. 1. Why does Hal find a fault specifically in the communications dish? And 2. Why doesn't he kill Dave during the first EVA? If we assume the AE-35 was never going to fail, the best answer is simply that replacing the unit is one of the more, if not the most dangerous tasks that a human would undertake during this mission. If he can convince a crew member to do an untethered solo spacewalk halfway down the ship, he can get them to do anything, or so he thinks. As we saw in the chess game, Hal is presuming the future actions of the crew. He calculates that if he sends the repairman flying into space, the onboard human will chase after him, hopefully without his helmet. And while gone, Hal can safely and easily remove the rest of the crew. If Hal was planning to kill them all, why not Dave on the first EVA, before there's any suspicion of his fallibility? It's most likely that Hal didn't want to execute his plan until they got closer to Jupiter, but not so close that it would automatically trigger the secret message.
Now that you are in Jupiter's space,
Or revive the hibernators,
and the entire crew is revived, it can be told to him.
which would make executing his plan that much harder. So his human tools are still probably needed for some small or menial tasks. It's another example of his hubris syndrome. Perhaps Hal didn't think they'd run a full diagnostic on a unit and would just take his word for it, again like the chess game. In any case, he's forced to move up his timetable when they discuss disconnecting him, something perhaps his
Pride.
didn't allow him to consider, which occurs after the first EVA. From then on, it's just how can he most efficiently terminate the crew and ensure the mission's success. Hal ultimately overplays his hand, underestimating the ingenuity of humans, in particular one David Bowman. Floyd's message plays immediately after Hal dies, as if it was ever present in his mind. It details the secret motive, explaining why Hal wanted to eliminate the inferior crew. He's superior after all. Why shouldn't he be the one to meet the higher life forms? And it begs some fascinating questions. Would the Stargate have opened if Discovery 1 entered it directly? Would Hal even be accepted? What would he look like if he was reborn, a la Dave? Anyway, stay tuned for part 2, which offers a different and conflicting interpretation of Hal's actions.